Hello, good afternoon, I guess, today. I didn't do a video yesterday, and I know a lot of you guys are not so much interested in me, but what these Epstein documents have to say. Hope everybody's gears are turning today. If not, dump some WD-40 in there. Got to keep them moving. So, let's go through it. I'm into about the 800-page mark of the documents, and this is all Virginia Roberts filing response stuff. So the first 20, 30 pages or so, most people won't find that interesting. It's her disputing Maxwell's lengthy section of her filing, saying that a part of her defense is she's not responsible for defamation in this case because she had no control over the publications that republished the statement she sent out to 20-something publications. Like, I just sent them this email and said it was a quotable statement. It's not my fault that they published it, you guys. It's kind of ridiculous, but unfortunately they're required, right, to respond to that. So you've got, 20, 30 pages that are kind of boring. Just, yes, you are under the law responsible for statements that you transmitted to members of the media that were then published that are defamatory against Virginia Roberts. So that part, most of us could care less. That's why reading through this can be kind of tedious. And then they start to get into Maxwell's specific claims against Virginia Roberts. Like, so you stated that she was a liar and this was all false and that the media shouldn't print the accusations that she was stating. So their approach is, and I'm sure that from a legal standpoint, part of their approach was to win this defamation suit based on just the evidence that they can provide of like the horrible stuff that most likely happened to Virginia Roberts. I mean, at least even according to Maxwell's evidence that she offered up, there was definitely opportunity for these things to have been done to this young woman when she was a minor. Like, there's even Maxwell included in her evidence flight logs and things of this 16-year-old girl being flown around the world on a private jet with Epstein and others. So, trying to say that it's not possible. Maxwell provided evidence that there was definitely opportunity. And you can very easily argue motives. I don't care who you are. Most adult men do not go to a club and approach a 16-year-old that shouldn't even be working in the spa there and go, hey, quit your job and become my private masseuse. Because all of us, most adults would know that a 16-year-old doesn't have the training to be a masseuse, that she obviously should not have been working in that capacity to begin with. So, most of this stuff, you guys correct me if you're wrong, if you want me to go through this section disputing whether or not Maxwell is liable based for the publications publishing the statement that she sent out. She sent this email to 20 different publications and then tried to argue that she had no control over whether or not they republished it. And the basis of that statement is essentially she sent it out to 20 different publications and said this young woman, Virginia Roberts, is a liar, and it was a warning shot to essentially say to all those publications, if you publish Virginia Roberts' allegations, I, Miss Maxwell, am going to sue you for defamation because she's a liar and it's not true, and I'll come after you guys if you publish any of her allegations. So many of those publications did publish at least sections of the email that Maxwell sent out to all of them, calling Virginia Roberts a liar and so on and so forth. So her argument that she's not liable for defamation because she had no control over whether or not they published that statement is just false. I mean, the entire basis for a defamation suit of this type is if you knowingly communicated with members of the media, you're opening the door for that to be published in print. So the only way she could claim that she's not responsible for what they published is if it hadn't come from her in the first place. So it's kind of, And most people, we really don't care about that part of what they argued back and forth in this, right? We care about what is documented in here and what pieces of evidence are provided for the trafficking and pedophilia, the charges that most of us care about, that this seemingly Epstein got away with for about 25 years. The other argument that Maxwell had filed in her section was, I'm not liable, even if she kind of like vaguely leaves room for the fact that maybe all these things happened to Virginia Roberts. And she says, even if it all happened, Miss Maxwell, I didn't help procure any girls. I didn't, engage in any illegal activity with those girls. I didn't. But she also provides a time frame by her own admission for being around Epstein at the time that he met this young girl working at Mar-a-Lago and recruited her to fly around the world with him and be his private masseuse. And Maxwell provides a timeline that she was there for all of these things, all of this time frame in which Virginia Roberts is alleging all this stuff happened. So at the very least, she's provided a pretty compelling argument. Maxwell provided a pretty compelling argument for any prosecutor to prosecute her as an accessory, because even if, which it's a stretch of the imagination at this point, everything that's public, everything that's out there, even if, say, Maxwell didn't actually, procure girls or engage in any of it or sell them or any of that, right? She was present and a witness to this behavior and these things for 20 some odd years. She never once intervened or tried to help any of these girls. She never went to any law enforcement. She never did any of the things that every mentally competent adult has a responsibility. If you witness a crime, especially crime against a child, you have a responsibility to go to the authorities or intervene. So at the very least, she's an accomplice in that manner, and she made the case for that. In her filing in this, Maxwell makes the case for her being an accomplice by laying out a time frame of all these activities that she was present for with Epstein. So she's made a pretty strong case for the prosecutors, and I'm sure that this will then be in some capacity, it will be in some way used in the current case, God willing, if it gets all the way to trial, that Maxwell is being held on right now. We can hope. So around page 812 or so, they've already argued against the "you're not liable because you didn't actually print it" stuff. And they're now moved on to actual arguments that Maxwell makes. So they've argued out the non-accountability action, which is you didn't publish them, so you're not accountable. They've made a really strong case that doesn't line up with the way the law works, and she doesn't have a case in that. So then they start working on establishing that Maxwell's statements that she did transmit to members of the press were in fact defamatory or false. So this is the section where she said Virginia Roberts is a liar, don't publish any of her accusations. That leaves this suit open to where, well, what were those accusations? Being sexually assaulted and illegally used for that kind of activity when she was a minor by Epstein and other people he knew, and that Maxwell was involved in that. Being trafficked, taken all over the country and given to other people outside of Epstein, so on and so forth. Now, Virginia Roberts did also allege that she was like a captive, like didn't have freedom of movement, now that's been pretty well documented in this evidence that was not the case. But from the ages of 16 to 19 or so, like 15 to 19-ish, it doesn't matter that she had other jobs or she shared an apartment with other people or she owned cars or she wasn't locked in a basement somewhere by Epstein. You can still be trafficked and not be kept in a cage somewhere. So that's kind of a false, a false idea that none of this could have possibly happened to her because she wasn't locked in our basement somewhere. Now, Virginia Roberts is the one that kind of started exaggerating her claims and pushed it all the way to the point where it was including all these other names that have disputed it or proven evidence to the contrary, or that she was actually enslaved because she has claimed that she had to escape them and flee to another country to get away from them and so on and so forth. And they kind of established in their evidence that that wasn't the case. She had freedom of movement. She even had encounters with police officers during this time frame in separate situations where Epstein and Maxwell were not present. She did not say anything to those officers about being trafficked or nothing was mentioned. Now, mind you, she was 16 and 17 at the time that those police encounters happened. Now, most 16 and 17-year-olds, especially given the circumstances that Virginia Robert came from, her family was not wealthy. She had dropped out of school when she was 14. She did not have financial means to afford her a lot of opportunities in life. She was working this odd job and that odd job and sharing an apartment with a fiance that was not much older than her. I think he was 18 when she was 16. So to her mind, I'm sure she didn't want to mention Epstein and the arrangement that they had to the police officer, because in a 16 or 17-year-old mind, the amount of money that he was giving that young woman to be his private masseuse and travel all over the world with him and allegedly engage in sex acts with other rich and powerful people that kind of paid him for the privilege or whatever that arrangement was, she would never see that amount of money in an entire year in the opportunity she had in her life. So she's not going to mention Maxwell or Epstein or any of that to the police, right? I don't think that's really an argument that none of this happened. So in Virginia Roberts' filing now, because those defamatory statements on Maxwell's part were saying a blanket statement, she's a liar, don't reprint any of her accusations, their legal approach that they're taking in this is, well, we're going to give you as much evidence and proof as we can to all of these allegations that are true. Now, Virginia Roberts put herself in kind of a cruddy place, exaggerating and claiming that she didn't have freedom of movement and was actually enslaved, and adding names to the list that could prove that it was impossible that they had had a sexual encounter with her. So she puts herself in an unfortunate situation, the fact that she did exaggerate, but that what she has an opportunity to do in this defamation filing is at least prove the allegations, or opportunity for the allegations, that she had been stating from the beginning before she started kind of adding on to these stories. And so that's what this filing is. They go, okay, we're going to prove that Miss Maxwell's statements that she transmitted to members of the media were false, calling Virginia Roberts a liar, saying none of this ever happened. We are going to go through and we're going to document everything that we can possibly prove that did happen. So they start off talking about the same basic time frame that Maxwell lined out in her filing, when they first met, how old Virginia Roberts was. She was working at Mar-a-Lago. Her father had gotten her job in the spa as a masseuse, even though she was not trained to be one and was not old enough. And so she lines out that same time frame. This is how we met, and this is how this occurred, right? Now, the first thing they touch on in when it comes to the specific allegations, right? So the first thing that occurred in the time frame, and this is not it's unfortunate, it's disgusting, but it's not a unique or new tactic that pedophiles or people that are grooming younger children use, and that is the tactic of, she says that one of the first times that anything to do with her relationship of being Epstein's masseuse or having a relationship with Maxwell and Epstein, they brought her to Epstein's, residence to massage Epstein. And while this young girl, she was 16 at the time, was giving him that massage, him and Maxwell began engaging in physical contact, which then turned into a sexual encounter, and they just proceeded to have that full-blown sexual encounter right in front of her when she had been massaging him. So it's exposing her to that, making it normal, whatever the case may be. So that's in page 813 of these documents. She starts to detail this was the first time that this relationship went from anything other than him paying her to do massages to anything sexual. And at that point, they had pulled her into that. It wasn't very long after that they moved that encounter to another room and instructed her to, so this was a separate occasion, but very quickly after that first encounter where massage turned into her just watching them, the very next time she was around them, they instructed her to massage Epstein and then Maxwell, and then just brought her, they did the same thing again, turning it from a massage to a sexual encounter, and they then pulled her into that encounter, and that was the first time she claims that Epstein had any sexual contact with her, and Maxwell was she claims, fully involved in that encounter. It was not Maxwell sitting off to the side and watching. So that looks like Maxwell was very much intimately involved in helping Epstein get these young girls comfortable and get them and groom them and have it become very normalized for them, not only so that he could abuse them, but get them comfortable so that they could be essentially sold or presented to these other rich and powerful men, and be comfortable with it and not realize this is not normal. So she details that out. And in these pages, it's just saying these are the things that that happened, and we're going to provide exhibits. There's attached exhibits on all of this of evidence of, at the bare minimum, opportunity for these things that she says happened to have occurred. So what she's documenting by opportunities, photos of her with them, or documents saying that she definitely was his private masseuse, or that the opportunity was there, she was alone with them, et cetera, et cetera. So the next allegation after those two that she details in this is her encounter with Prince Andrew. And she starts to detail out when they first introduced her to Prince Andrew. And she says that there will be exhibits attached. Exhibit D is the first one in regards to Prince Andrew, that there were 3 separate instances in 3 separate geographic locations where they had this specific young woman, Virginia Roberts, have a sexual encounter or be abused by Prince Andrew. So that's the third set of allegations that they go, here are the exhibits attached that prove that they did, at the very least, have this young woman meet Prince Andrew and be in the presence of Prince. Like, their opportunity was there, and she's attached what proof she could have that. And we'll go through later the actual, I'm going to do a separate video at the end of all this that shows you guys specifically the evidence that's attached on Maxwell's side and Miss Roberts' side. Now, that's all in this document that I've put the link to that in every single video description. You guys can look through it. So all of their evidence exhibits are in this filing, along with just their written responses, right? Now, this is a section where they talk about an interview that she did in 2011. And they're essentially what Maxwell tried to say is that this interview that she did in 2011, because it didn't include all of these allegations, and Virginia Roberts did not detail out everything that she is now putting in this filing or that she's submitted in other court cases, that must mean that since she didn't tell this journalist, or she didn't divulge all of that during that interview, it's not like that interview is more valid than court filings, which I think is a really strange way to argue that. But I imagine once you were caught on this kind of level, you'd kind of go to whatever lengths to cast doubt on it. So one thing that Maxwell had detailed was, well, she did this interview with Miss Churcher in 2011, and none of this was mentioned, or she didn't have the same evidence then, or So it's kind of like trying to cast doubt on it. And Virginia Roberts' team replies to that by saying, we've attached proof of at least, and that you guys, that Epstein and Maxwell definitely put her in the same room with Prince Andrew, that they introduced. There's pictures of her with him. So she's like, here's the proof that I have that at the very least, the opportunity for what I am saying happened, right? So it's hard for Maxwell to say you're lying about this, it never occurred, yada yada, when Maxwell could not provide proof that they never took her and introduced her to Prince Andrew and had him around her on multiple occasions, where Miss Roberts' team, or Virginia Roberts' team, has been able to provide proof that they definitely took her overseas and had her in the company of Prince Andrew on at least 3 separate occasions. And the irony is the flight logs, the separate 75-page document of flight logs that have been released also confirm that. So they can't really, the defamation suit is really based on the facts that Maxwell really can't call her a liar if she cannot provide any evidence that it's impossible, that what she says happens, et cetera, et cetera. And Roberts' team is doing a very good job up to this point of providing evidence that the opportunity was certainly there. And at this point, we know for sure, like Epstein pled guilty on 2 separate occasions now. Like we know for sure that he and several people he was associated with were definitely engaging in sexual abuse of minors, right? So that's not a question anymore. It's not you can prove your innocence. And he admitted it. He pled guilty in 2005. And then again, before his death a couple years ago, he was in jail because he was taking a plea deal, because he was admitting guilt. So they really don't have a case to say, oh, you're lying, when they can't provide any proof that they didn't take this 16-year-old girl all over the world and have her in the company of these people that she, is alleging that this stuff happened. It's very hard to say, oh, you're lying, and win a defamation suit like this when she has the proof that they at least took her and she had her meet with these people. That a 16, 17-year-old girl who's a high school dropout and at the socioeconomic level that she would never have access to Prince Andrew of her own, somehow random, or President Clinton, or how there's no way for them to try to disprove that they weren't the ones taking her to specifically introduce her to these very wealthy and powerful people that she would never have access to on her own. So this section, it looks like, the next 200 pages are going to be Roberts detailing out where we've moved past kind of the legal jargon arguments and disputing Maxwell's other defenses of herself, if you want to call them that. And now we're on to really, this is the section where she's going to be further detailing the allegations of what happened to her. So I don't think that her team is really going to fixate on the enslavement angle that Miss Roberts kind of put forth, because Maxwell's team did do a really good job of detailing out that she had freedom of movement. She could have, if to her mind, if she had realized how nefarious the situation was, she had the opportunity to go to police. But I think it's really also detailed out that this young woman, having never had access to the kind of income he was giving her or opportunity, or I don't think that at that age that she even understood what this was. I really don't. I think when she had encounters with police when she was of that age, I don't think she ever would have mentioned them, because I think, like, grooming, the purpose of grooming is to make that kid think that this person is their friend. This person is helping them. It's no big deal. Friends do this kind of stuff with each other all the time, et cetera, et cetera. That 16-year-old and 17-year-old and even 18-year-old Virginia Roberts did not recognize what they were doing as abuse. So, of course, she didn't mention them with her 2 encounters with police on separate matters altogether during this time frame. So I don't really see that as an argument. So we'll see how the rest of this goes. I'm getting the bug again. So I'll probably read through the rest of it in the next couple of days, and we'll do a video getting to the end of the document. And then I'll do a video putting up all the screen grabs of the more interesting evidence and see what you guys think of that. As always, thank you for stopping by. Keep your gears turning. Keep asking questions. The subscribe star went up today, so check that out. Love you guys. Bye.